And welcome back to another episode of Devil Dash. I'm Wills, joined by Josh. Nothing's changed all that much from the ASU side of things in football. As you know, it's now been 2 weeks of canceled games due to COVID. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about how this 2 week layoff is going to affect ASU, if it will at all. How ASU is going to avoid a repeat from last year, and how they absolutely got stomped by Utah. And then probably not, but we're just going to discuss, anything's possible in this year. Does the winner of this game have a shot in the South? So we're going to kind of jump into all those different things. But we're going to start off with the biggest thing that's going on in the football program right now, and that is the COVID problems. Almost an entire side of the ball tested positive for COVID. Herm Edwards tested positive for COVID. Just cancellations were pretty much mandatory. This game this week already got moved to Sunday. So it's still up in the air. Josh, what can we expect from 2 week layoff from ASU?
I think the number one thing you can expect is a lot of missing faces on, probably both sides of the ball and maybe even in the coaching staff. We're not 100% sure on how many players and exactly who has the virus, but, there's quite a few people on the team that have it. And even people with who have contact traced and, been quarantined for that too, they're going to be out of the game. So, yeah, you're going to have a bunch of guys that need to step up and take care of what needs to be taken care of on their side of the ball in this game, for the Devils at least.
Hopefully the people that tested positive at the very beginning have quarantined for the 14 days. But I know there's some names like Michael Turk, the punter, actually. He has to do a 14-day quarantine period that started, I believe, like 2 or 3 days ago, just because, not because he even tested positive, but because of contact tracing, until he gets like 4 or 5 straight negative tests with no symptoms. There's some weird thing like that. So ASU could be without their punter this Sunday potentially, and he's I hate to say it, he's one of their better players too. But the 2 week layoff's tough because we expected a lot from Utah coming into this week. And we saw Cal even in Cal's first game with one cancellation. We thought Cal was going to be a lot better of a team. They got stomped in week 1, and then week 2 they played a lot better and looked a lot more improved. A team that had a game under their belt and shook off some of the rust. So the thing that I'm most worried about is if ASU has given up at this point. I mean, what are you playing for? It's a 4-game season. You've lost, not lost, but you've lost the last game you played. You basically out of the South now, and it's really, how does Herm Edwards get these guys to show up for these games? These big time moments, because unless you're going to the draft, these games don't mean a whole lot for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of the same mentality probably since the beginning. I mean, these players and coaches alike knew that this situation was possible going into the season. So you just got to tell these guys, hey, this is just your opportunity to, keep your head down and get your work in. There's a bunch of crazy crap going on, especially with the sports and trying to get all these games in these situations. But you just got to, focus on the draft, focus on your next year of college, whatever your next step is, and just go out there and make plays.
I mean, from ASU's side of things, I think there's still a whole lot to prove because, I mean, they were the better team for that USC game for, a majority of the game. We've talked about that. And they barely lost that game. And they fumbled it away at the end. And I think there's going to be a bad taste in their mouth. They would have loved to get it out in the last 2 weeks, but I think they proved that they can run the ball, but they didn't prove a whole lot passing. Jayden Daniels wasn't that accurate. The O-line didn't play that well. Frank Darby played for, I think like 1 series, didn't even finish the first series maybe. And it's, I think they still have a whole lot to prove with these better players on the team. I know Rashad White and DeMonte Trayanum played awesome, but those are 2 guys trying to prove themselves. And I think there's some people that have been here on the team that, didn't really get to prove themselves in week 1. And, it's now week 4. Time's running out on the season. So I think we're going to see a little more urgency from this Arizona State team. But, Utah, they pretty much played themselves out of it, even though their first 2 cancellations have come the first 2 weeks of the season. But, when you lose to USC, and ASU and Utah both lost to USC now, it's basically this 2 week layoff is going to make it interesting because, this game normally is, an interdivision rival, and, they're always on the top half of the Pac-12 South usually. And, it's a very energetic game, but I'm curious to see what that energy is going to be like in this game.
Well, both teams are going to be ready to play. I mean, Heck, Utah's only played one game this season, so they're fired up, and I mean ASU should be too. I mean, hopefully not everyone's feeling a little better, but
Yeah.
we got stomped. I mean, we'll talk about that later too. I don't want to get into it.
Yeah.
But last year, man, they have to have a bad taste in their mouth. It's not in Utah; it's in Arizona this year if it happens. So that'll be huge. Whether there's fans there or not, it's gonna feel good not playing in the rain either. So I think ASU is gonna come out and definitely show them that they're a lot better than last year.
Yeah, and it's really tough. You think Utah would be fired up, right? And I thought that last week for sure because they're almost chomping at the bits to play football. They've waited this long, and then right when it was about to be handed to them, it got snagged away again. And I wanted to see a lot more from this Utah team last week. And I know, their starting quarterback got injured, in the first half, I believe, and maybe even the first season. I want to say he threw like 6 or 7 passes in that game, and that's a killer when you're starting quarterback. I don't know where ASU would be if Jayden Daniels got hurt for the rest of the season, and so they do get a pass there. But again, he's going to be out this week, so it's going to be the same team that ASU sees. And I was expecting a lot more from them last week, so I think it'll be interesting to see now that they've played a game and there's only 4 games left for them, or sorry, 3 games left for Utah now. It's just kind of a head scratcher of what team is going to show up. And I think it's a little more, this game's always energetic, but the thing is Utah always plays ASU well. And I'm wondering if this is the year that starts to change and that Herm Edwards kind of overtakes the calves of Utah's head coach and, kind of puts ASU in that same talk with USC, even though they're not going to get a chance to play even 5 games this year, maybe 6.
And that's going to be just so hard to do with, given everything that's happened, the circumstances. Is Herm even going to be the head coach? Even if the Devils play, is he going to be on the field? Like, what?
He released a statement today. I don't have it in front of me, but he was saying that he was feeling a lot better. He appreciates everyone's prayers and that he's going to return to the practice field sometime this week. So I think if this game happens, he'll be on the field. But regardless, I don't think he calls offensive. He might call defensive plays, but I know he doesn't call offensive plays. And I want to say Antonio Pierce might be the play caller. Him and Marvin Lewis might split play calling duty. So, Herm's obviously we talk about it all the time, the game manager, but, a loss of Herm is a loss of your leader, but not one of your integral play callers, which I think is a bigger thing.
Yeah, and, if this game happens, it's gonna be a collective effort from the Sun Devils because like we said earlier, there's gonna be a bunch of guys missing on both sides of the ball, and Utah will always play us good, and regardless if their starter quarterback's out, they could stuff Jayden. We'll see.
Yeah, and we can transition over to that. We want to talk about last year's game because I know it brings up a lot of salty taste for Sun Devil fans because, as we have on the screen here, Jayden accounted for 33 yards the entire game. His offense, it wasn't the thing that's sad about it is it really wasn't even Jayden Daniels' fault. If you look at his stat line in that game, it's probably going to be the worst stat line he ever plays, even in the NFL. I mean, it was awful. The offensive line was he would have to line up in shotgun, and by the time the ball got his hands, his offensive linemen were already getting beat. So, this is a Utah team that lost 9 starters from the year before on the defensive side of the ball. So, they had a stout defense last year and, were really, really stifling. And they showed that to ASU. We know that very well. But different team. They're not going to run the balls. They don't have as much as they don't have Zach Moss anymore. They don't have, the senior quarterback that's led that team for a few years. So everything points to this isn't going to be a repeat of last year. But like we said, USC always plays Utah well, and Utah always plays ASU well. So, and usually the little triangle there is ASU plays USC pretty well every year too. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I don't think last year's it's going to be dominant game at all. If anything, I think ASU dominates. I don't think after what I saw from Utah last week with a backup quarterback too, I don't think Utah wins this game, and I don't think it's all that close. I don't think it's a blowout, but Utah's defense is going to be the difference maker here. We've seen one game of the 9 guys that they have been replaced, so there's a lot of inexperience there, and that's only something that's going to get better if you're a Utah fan.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take a big basic look at it, they've only really played 1 game this year. I mean, so have the Sun Devils, but I feel like we've got more under our belt than them. for some reason. You know what I mean? I don't know why, but just for some reason, I think we do. And this is going to be a completely different game than last year. I mean, last year Utah was ranked 16th in the nation. They had a bunch of hype around them, and the weather in that game was just horrible. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was raining about 70% of the time. Players were falling in the mud and crap like that, and there's going to be no Zach Moss versus Eno Benjamin. These two just hard-nosed, big running backs going at it and trying to control each side of the ball. It's going to be a lot different. I think we're going to see, both quarterbacks airing the ball out a little bit. For one, the Jayden needs to get his guys under pressure and get them making plays. I mean, our first game against USC was not that impressive from the wide receiver standpoint. I mean, we'll have Darby back for sure, hopefully, so that's going to be a big boost in that category.
And I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. I'll give you something for both sides of the ball and how ASU can win this game. It's for one, obviously Darby only had one catch for 2 or 3 yards last week, but he's going to be back and probably get at least 6 or 7 or 8 targets at least this week. And who's going to be ASU's number 2 receiver? I wrote about this in my article coming out tomorrow for Sports Pack 12. It's, last week it was Rashad White who led with, I think it was 80 yards, but, one of those plays was a 55-yard swing pass, that he just made a great move. And that's not really something you can, he's not an Alvin Kamara where he's lining up in the slot, he can motion out. And so it's going to be interesting to see which of these receivers, we talked about it so much before the season started, about these young receivers, who's going to step up, or, ASU ran the ball really well. Are they really just going to rely on 1, maybe 2 receivers? And, maybe that second receiver just is asked to make 1 to 2 plays a game. These 2 running backs were so dynamic, and I'm curious to see if Herm Edwards still sticks with this running game, or, kind of gives Jayden the key to the castle a little more and say, you know what, like, this is your offense, go win us the game. And I think that's going to be a storyline moving forward, because this season really doesn't mean as much. Is ASU even going to play in a bowl game after playing 4 games? I don't know what the criteria is with this weird year, but it's going to be interesting to see how this offensive run is run, because we know Jayden has another year left. So, Herm still wants to work on things, and he's not going to be leaving after this year. So, you might not want to get him hurt in a season that doesn't mean all that much.
Yeah, it's tough because, first of all, we're not really too sure of what defense, Utah is going to throw at us. And, obviously, both coaches are going to make adjustments on both sides of the ball, especially on the offensive side with Jayden. But I completely agree with you. I mean, look, this season, let's just Kobe, throw it in the trash. I mean,
and I'm sure Utah fans can agree with us there, especially when BYU's good. I mean,
that's a really sore subject for our Utah Dash host
and USC Dash.
But I mean, just take a look at the season, how it is right now, and what's left, what could happen, how many cancellations could come. Just give Jayden the keys, like he said. Let him go wild. Let him go crazy with this offense. Figure it out all for next year, because that's the true test. I mean, we at the beginning of this season, we kind of thought it was going to be, a 6-7 game sprint, kind of like the baseball season, but it's not anymore, and it just kind of fell apart. And I'm totally with you on that. I mean, just let Jayden run. Let's try some crazy things. Let's see what works. But you do need to remember that Chip, and some of those other young running backs like David too, or Daniel. I'm sorry. They need to get that time. They need to get those reps.
And I think that's part of the reason that we ran the ball so much is Jayden's accuracy wasn't all that great against USC, so you run the ball more. That makes sense. But also, the game manager Herm we had the 13-point lead. He wanted to run clock. And, it obviously didn't work out for him as the onside kick didn't bounce our way and stuff like that. But, at that point in time, we thought we had the lead on USC and that we would control the Pac-12 South after that game. And, Herm wasn't thinking that 2 games were going to get canceled, and he was just playing Arizona State football. And I think that's very telling of, the team that Jayden Daniels came to versus, a likes of Keaton Slovis, because, Keaton Slovis is going to finish with, 50, 55 passing attempts almost every game. And, he's going to have those gaudy numbers of 350 yards passing and 3 or 4 touchdowns. But, Jayden's not going to have those. And I think it's going to be this season, really, because next season we're probably going to still stick to pound the ball, come up with some big play action plays downfield, and it's going to be interesting to see what type of identity this team takes. Whether it's a run the ball, play hard nosed defense, and just try to win by getting points whenever you can, stuff like that. And I think that's something as ASU fans, because we're not really gauging the win-loss record at this point anymore, because you don't know how many games we're going to play. So, just hold this offense to certain standards where they can get better and hope for wins. Obviously, no one's rooting for a loss, but, we just want these players to get better. And so the recruiting comes in and says, hey, I want to play with Jayden Daniels right there, not hey, I'm going to go play with Keaton Slovis in his last year in the Pac-12 South.
Yeah, and this, like you said, the record doesn't really matter anymore this year. You just want to see progression in your teams, and that's just really hard to do when these games keep getting canceled.
Yeah,
especially with ASU, just the outbreak that we've had. We're talking about all this stuff, and it's very quite possible that this Utah game doesn't even happen on Sunday. So it already got moved back one day. I mean, I don't think it gets moved back another day. I think if that Sunday's that it factor. If it can't happen by Sunday, they're just gonna say, hey, scratch this and on to the next week.
Well, and it's already really strange for college games to be played on Sunday because it's kind of the NFL's day. It's kind of taken over, church as like the day of what you do on Sundays is watch football. And I'm not trying to really make a joke. That's kind of an honest. Obviously, there's more people that are religious that watch football, but in America, it's kind of become a new religion of football, and it's really weird that people take it this seriously, and that it puts the virus puts things into perspective. That football isn't the end of the world, and it sucks for a lot of us fans, and I'm sure we're talking about Utah week this week. Utah and ASU have had the most cancellations at anyone in the Pac-12, so they can relate to us. And it's tough. We're just excited to see some football, and we want to see our guys succeed. We want to see Jayden Daniels get drafted as high as possible. Because he went to our college, and it's exciting to see your team do well rather than lose. And that doesn't really need to be stated, but we want to see this improvement for next season, because not that I'm already looking forward to next season, but this team is very good. This team has a lot of talent, and depending on who comes back next year with the eligibility, the extra year of eligibility, this team has a lot of talent to compete with USC and potentially, an Oregon or a Washington next year in the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah, and one of the most crucial aspects of building a team, getting the years of Herman recruits is having a full season and playing out that season and working out the kinks of seeing if your assistant coach needs to get fired, if he's stealing money or whatever. I don't know, but you're not going to figure anything out in a flipping 3-game season. That's why it's just so tough.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what the bowls are going to look like, because bowl games mean so much to programs, whether it's recruiting wise or money wise for some of these smaller programs, and there's been a lot that have been canceled already. And how are you going to judge a potential 2-2 or 3-1 ASU team versus a 7-5 team from the Big Ten? I mean, the Big Ten's a good conference. We've seen struggles from some of the better teams, historically better teams, but it's going to be interesting to see if ASU even wants to go to a bowl game after everything they've seen just traveling once to Los Angeles.
I mean, look, the conference is going to figure out a way to
get as many teams in.
Pair up that 7-5 Big Ten team against USC per se, but I'm not going to dive into how that all works out. But bottom line is, you're probably not going to see any Pac-12 teams in that playoff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're going to transition into to make the playoff. To make the playoff, you have to win the South to start. You win the South, you win the Pac-12. You have to go undefeated. And as Washington, I think they might have lost once that year, but they made the playoff. And so, does the winner of this game, we've already gone over it. The basic answer to this is: does the winner of this game have a shot in the South? And the answer is no. Realistically, 99.999, as many nines as you can go on, no. But the reason we want to bring it up, our friend Jason over there from Colorado, he's saying that this game's going to decide the South, and he's right. The records say this is going to decide the South. To be honest, I have been one of the biggest haters on USC this year, saying that they're not going to, they're not all that good. They've won 3 games in a row and have moved up 1 ranking in the last 3 weeks. I mean, not that the nation's not that impressed with them. No one is, and I think they're going to beat Colorado pretty handily here. But that being said, if Colorado was to beat them here, I think Colorado's a very beatable team where they're not going to run the table for the rest of the year. Let's say USC takes a loss here and they sit at what, 3-1? Never know what could happen regarding cancellations, regarding wins and losses after that. Because if USC loses a game, their playoff hopes, if you're a USC fan, they still believe in those, whatever they're doing down there. But, their playoff hopes are over, and you could see a team kind of pack it in after that. Not saying USC will, but, it's a possibility. So, like I said, the answer to this question is, can the winner of this team win the South? Probably not. Most definitely not. But, if you're an ASU or Utah fan, the winner of this game probably wants to root for a Colorado win. I think that's the most realistic thing. And, it's always fun to root against USC. So,
hey, I agree with you on that. It is always fun to root against the Trojans, especially when they're playing undefeated Colorado. And my boy Jason Marks, let's go Bucks.
That sounds like an oxymoron, like undefeated Colorado. Like that shouldn't be; those two things shouldn't be used in the same sentence.
Hey, their defense is legit this year for the Pac-12.
Yeah, well, we'll see when they play. The air raid offense, dangerous that can be. But what do you see? I know we're just talking about the South here. What do you see from the North? Oregon didn't look all that impressive against a DTR-less UCLA. DTR looked amazing in the first week, and if he was on that field, UCLA probably wins. I think that's safe to say, but you can't say that. But what do you think of the North? Is the North open? Does Oregon even have a shot at the playoff? What do you think?
It's really tough to say. Oregon is a great team. Tyler Shuck. I'll say this once a week on every Dash Sports video if I have to. Tyler Shuck, AZ quarterbacks, baby, let's go.
We gotta try to get him on the show one week.
Hey, right. We got to. But what was your question again?
Do you think the North Oregon is attainable for Washington? We saw Washington dominate a Arizona team that USC could barely handle. So, do you think this North is more open than we originally thought?
I think Oregon really dropped the ball against UCLA. No DTR, and they barely won by 3 points. Seriously?
And UCLA's turnover before halftime was awful. But, they tried to throw the Hail Mary from their own 30-yard line, and they got a pick six. The Oregon got a pick six with 0 seconds left. It was awful.
That's why you deal with the ball with 2 seconds left.
And they're on their own 30, and it's just like, oh, man. And then the camera instantly pans to Chip Kelly, and it's just him standing with his hands on his hips. And makes me feel good to see that man sad. But, it's the North is interesting. I would love to see a Washington versus BYU. And, anyone watching this probably knows that, already that the Pac-12 has been the one halting that game from happening because they're worried ASU can't play this weekend. And if ASU can't play, they want Washington to play Utah in a Pac-12 versus Pac-12 team, so no one's left out. That being said, as of right now, ASU is planning to play. And, Washington needs a team to play. They looked awesome last week, and BYU still undefeated. For BYU, if you go get a win over Washington on your record, you can legitimately say, you know what, we might deserve to be in the playoff. We beat a very good Power 5 team, a team with a good defense. And you know what, you have an argument there. If you go out, there's talks of BYU scheduling Cincinnati this week. The winner of that game is basically in the playoff potentially, because the Big 12 is not going to make it and the Pac-12 is probably not going to make it. So, it's going to be interesting to see how, the Pac-12 plays a hand in this because so far, I think every week the Pac-12 has had a cancellation, and that's continued so far. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of these worse teams, like a U of A gets COVID against an Oregon, how that could affect, if Oregon plays a better team, Oregon schedules a BYU or something like that. The Pac-12 could play a very big hand in how college football playoff plays out.
It could, and that's something that usually never really happens. The Pac-12 is always eating itself alive and just canceling out other teams' opportunities to make the playoff and represent the Pac-12. But hey, if I'm BYU, I saw. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you've seen it as well. You're on Twitter just about as much as me, but BYU came out saying, "Hey, anytime, any place, anywhere, let's play."
That's why I kind of want to defend BYU here. That's what I'm saying. I think Larry Scott is the one holding this game back because they're worried that ASU is not going to be able to play. And I went up in the middle of the show and looked up, the Vegas lines on the game, and there's not even a lineup for the game. So I don't know if Vegas doesn't think that they're going to play, or
for the Arizona State game.
Arizona State.
The opening line was 5.
Really, 5. I looked it up and I couldn't find it, but it's this game might not happen. And if Utah get screwed out of a cancellation game, why not Utah BYU? Because that's a rivalry game. BYU could probably beat up on Utah, and I think they would like that a lot more than Washington. So I don't know. It's going to be. And when I say the Pac-12 plays a hand in the college football playoff, it's not playing a hand by they have a good team that could affect it. I know Oregon has a legitimate shot. They're in the top 10 this week, but I think they could have a bigger hand in playing some of these non-conference teams like a Cincinnati or a BYU.
Well, we'll see if Larry decides to pull the trigger on some of these cancellations because, if let's just be realistic about this. We've seen this many cancellations. There's going to be more to happen. I mean, yeah, three more weeks of football, over under six cancellations. In the Pac-12
this far,
alone,
you're saying?
In the Pac-12 alone.
This far? Or to this point, are you saying
for the next 3 weeks? 6 cancellations.
I'm going to say under because I think, a lot of these teams that did get it, like the ASUs, the Utahs, I don't think they're going to hopefully they don't get it again. But it'll also be interesting to see if, we saw DTR, I guess, he said he didn't have corona, but he was out for, COVID reasons or whatever. But if a star quarterback gets hurt, the entire quarterback room gets hurt. What can a team do if, only 4 players have, but they're all 4 the starting quarterbacks? It's like, you kind of put yourself in a bad jam at that point. And excuse me. And, it's really tough. We saw Florida State cancel a game this week against Clemson. We saw Dabo Swinney's comments. And he said that Florida State, they passed all these NCAA rules, but Florida State just didn't want to play. And kind of created this big argument of, should they be forced to play if they passed all the rules? Or, it's kind of this weird thing. This year in football has just been so weird. And you don't know what to expect. The fact that we're sitting up here predicting how many cancellations could happen in a college football season it's kind of sad because that's just the reality we're living in at this point.
Yep, and I'm still going to be questioning why the committee never decided to go 18 or 16 college football playoffs.
Yeah, and I'll still be wondering how ASU didn't win that game against USC.
Yeah.
But okay, give me a surprise player, to this point that wasn't supposed to be one of the better players in the conference, but to this point has surprised you a lot.
Jamar Jefferson, maybe Ohio State. Oregon State, is he their running back?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just saw a couple stats from him over the weekend where his average rushing yard per game was out of the roof. And I know it's probably just 1 or 2 games, but
yeah,
it's still an impressive feat regardless. Because I've never heard of the man in my life.
And that Oregon State team, we talk about it with our other Dash employees, that it's been really a laughing stock of the Pac-12 for a long time, especially in that northern side. It's been really the laughing stock of the North, and especially when your rival has run really the entire Pac-12 for a while. It's pretty sad for them, but he's been a part of, that revival of that program, and it's been pretty impressive. But I'm going to give you a name. Stay in the North, stay, the cold states. Is De La Aurora from Washington State. He's been impressive. They lost their head coach. Gardner Minshew's in the NFL now. I know he's been gone for 2 years now, but he had a lot of reasons to, kind of restart and just rebuild from the beginning. And, I know they're not that good. They're not winning a ton of games, but that quarterback, man, he's looked impressive, and he keeps them in a lot of games. He kept them in that Oregon game for a long time, and I think that's someone you can build a program around and, actually recruit some talented players to that school to play with him.
Yeah, I mean, who was their guy last year? They almost beat us, man.
Oh, my gosh, another guy that threw for 50 million yards in college. I forgot his name, but
shootout.
That was the game that Jayden ran for the touchdown and got helicopter spun at the end. But all right, give me a winner for this game. Utah, ASU, and give me a score prediction.
Well, I see I see it being somewhat similar to the USC game. I think ASU covers the spread by 2 touchdowns though. Let's go 35-12.
I think ASU unloads here. I think ASU has a big offensive day. I think the defense is average once again. I'm going to go 45-27 is my final. I think offense wins them the game here. If you have anything, if you disagree with us, you can follow us on Twitter. Our ads are on the screen. We have articles now for Sports Pack 12. They're on Twitter at Sports Pack 12. You can check them out there. If you're not following them, go give them a follow. Follow us on all social medias. That's at Dash Sports TV. If you want to check out our website, it's dashsports.tv. And, we're here every week. So we will see you next week, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving, and thank you for joining us this week. See you later.